Oh, wow. Yes, indeed, people. It's the Clark the Shark Show, 1-800-449-8255. And I'm going to have to keep on trying to get through this review. This is part 3. It's now a trilogy. Sharky, you're going to make it through this review of one of Genesis's greatest albums, Genocide. You know, Elvis, Elvi, Octopus, Octopi, Genocide. Nursery Crime, 1971. And such an amazing year was 1971. The Rolling Stones, Sticky Fingers, The Who, Who's Next, Led Zeppelin 4, Jethro Tull, Aqualung. Man, so much incredible shit. Captain Beyond was recorded in 71. I think Zappa, Chunga's Revenge is from 71. I mean, man, tons and tons and tons of great albums from 1971. The greatest year in rock and roll. But there are no albums greater than Genesis Nursery Crime. Of course, with this girl, she's playing a game with human heads. And, I mean, look at, that's just disgusting. She's just such an evil girl. At 1-800-449-8255. Yeah, and I still can't figure out this other lady on a, like, bicycle feet or something. But, and then sometimes I'm like, wait a minute, was this true? Did this really happen? Did they play croquet with people's heads in England? I think they did, man. You know, come on, it's white people. They do fucked up shit. At 1-800-449-8255. But even Peter Gabriel had to be amused at this amazing album cover. I love this album cover. Genesis Nursery Crime, 1971. What a great year for rock music, 1971. There's just too much good shit, man, in 1971. At 1-800-449-8255. I mean, for Who's Next alone, and man, such a year. ELP, great album from ELP too. And you know, I love Genesis, Tony Banks and Steve Hackett, and you know, this is the debut album for Steve Hackett and Phil Collins on this album. And Phil Collins' drumming is like, it's not quite there yet on this album, but it's very interesting. And he really locks in with Mike Rutherford's amazing bass playing. I would say the standout, amazing musician on this album is Mike Rutherford. But of course, you know, you got to talk about Tony Banks. And Steve Hackett brings this angry, snarling, barking guitar to this album and to this band that this band did not have before it had Steve Hackett. Just an incredible guitar player. And Genesis, of course, would get so much better after this album, and yet this album still feels like my favorite Genesis album. I mean, this cover, just for this cover alone, and this British girl, she's playing croquet or golf, or some sport with human heads, like the Queen maybe took off their heads. At 1-800-449-8255, the Clark the Shark Show, but I just gotta mention Peter Gabriel, the lead singer, who really doesn't go with these guys at all. It's like these are solo albums all by Peter Gabriel, and he has a backing band. And yet, that's not true at all. This is a whole band. Everybody is doing their thing and contributing to the democracy, which is Genesis. All their albums, but definitely 1971's Nursery Crime. It's just such an amazing album. I mean, for Steve Hackett and his snarling, pounding guitar, he almost sounds like if Pete Townsend went progressive. He just hits with these angry, banging sounds. And all the while, Phil Collins and Mike Rutherford are this tight little machine unto themselves. They're playing just these 16th notes and just clangering around in the background while Banks and Hackett are doing their thing, and then Peter Gabriel's just the narrator of this amazing band, man. I wish Peter Gabriel never quit Genesis, but I love Peter Gabriel solo. Man, his first 3-4 solo albums are amazing. At 1-800-449-8255, the Clark the Shark Show. Clark the Shark just coming to you live from the golden EIB Sharkerphone. It's not a microphone, man. Don't call it that, man. It's a Sharkerphone. And you didn't die and go to heaven. You're not there, man. You're just on Earth, sitting in your leather chair at home, and you're witnessing the testimony. Another amazing review from Clark the Shark, where I talk about one of my favorite albums growing up as a kid. I remember being 21 in 1986, living out in Torrance in an apartment that I shared with the bass player, Dave Basin. And I would play this album to death, man. And Tom Shannon, the bass player from Technicolor Yawn, which later became Death and Taxes, he would come over and he would play this album. And me and Tom Shannon, we would both just be in awe of the marvel that is Genesis Nursery Crime. And of course, all their albums, man, are just so awesome. I love Genesis. I mean, it's a different sound from Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Yes. Genesis they are totally unique and unto themselves. I mean, all those bands are different and unique, but there's something about Genesis with Peter Gabriel. Peter Gabriel's just this wise frontman genius, narrator, just always telling his stories. And he doesn't always write the lyrics. Sometimes Rutherford or Banks or somebody else writes the lyrics. But when Peter Gabriel translates these lyrics to you, it's not only like Peter Gabriel wrote them, but it's like his very brain is, everything that comes out of his mouth is just coming from the genius brain of Peter Gabriel. At 1-800-449-8255, the Clark the Shark Show. And, man, I don't care what the reviews of this are, because, yeah, it only gets 5 stars from me, man. Genesis. Every Genesis album, up to Duke, gets 5 from Clark, man. Oh, yeah, baby. Somebody gave it like a 2 out of 5. I mean, what's this? Rolling Stone, yeah. Duh. But, the musical box. Man, I mean, it's like the first Supper's Ready. Long, 10:25 of beautiful progressive rock. The lyrics by Peter Gabriel. And, The musical box is just so amazing, man. I love that. It's just, I don't know what's better, Supper's Ready or, you know, I'd say the musical box is better because it's just this weird story, man. It goes on forever. And for absent friends, little, those little short little ditties, but it's just this Victorian British little sound. They're beyond progressive rock, man. They're genius. Oh, man, genius. And the return of the giant hogweed is just such a Peter Gabriel masterpiece. But of course, Tony Banks is locked in with, Rutherford and Hackett on this pretty long song, 8 minutes. I love the return of Giant Hogweed. One of my favorite all-time songs. Definitely one of my favorite Genesis excursions and length. I mean, these guys got 8 and 10-minute songs on their third album. 2 great albums before this one. But side 2 is even more amazing. 7 Stones, I love it. I love it. Tony Banks writes it, but Peter Gabriel sings it, and you could swear, man. It's 7 Stones is just so beautiful. It's a Peter Gabriel song. And man, you're in progressive rock heaven on side 2 of this album. But Harold the Barrel is just so funny, and it's like the de facto hit song on the album. I mean, it almost sounds like the Kinks, like could be off Muswell Hillbillies or something. I love Harold the Barrel, and Gabriel is just so witty and charming, like, up on the window. Like a man disappeared this morning in a mouse brown overcoat. I mean, it's all good, man. Harold the Barrel, he's just up there swaying side to side. And his mum is like, if your father was alive, he'd be very, very, very upset. With Harold the Barrel. It's the typical Peter Gabriel genius, but you can tell this guy's gonna be amazing, man, with Harold the Barrel. And Harlequin, I think that's Phil, man. That's not Pete. Phil, you can tell. If anything ever happens to Pete, he's gonna be the singer of Genesis. I mean, nobody knows it back then in 1971 at 1-800-449-8255. But, oh man, Harlequin by Mike Rutherford, British eccentric bassist. And of course, The Fountain of Salmacis is probably one of my favorite songs, just for the intro and the beautiful Tony Banks keyboards throughout. And Mike Rutherford is just incredible, always incredible on bass. And it's just like Peter Gabriel is narrating once again in this long, beautiful song that I've played 10,000 times, man. I love this song. So long. It's 8 minutes. So many long songs on this album, but they gotta be long. This is progressive rock at its best. But it's almost like It's just really great music. I hate to label this prog rock. This album is funny, witty. I mean, the Hogweed, Harold the Barrel, and the beautiful Seven Stones, and the musical box is one of those signature, amazing Genesis songs. It's it's my favorite Genesis album. I'm just gonna say it right now, and it's so early in the game, 1971. Um, I mean, just for Tony Banks alone, but Hackett is such a monster here, and it's his first album, and it's Phil's first album with the band, and both of those guys are asserting themselves. They're like, man, we don't care if Rutherford and Banks think they're such amazing, genius, brilliant British proggers. And Phil Collins and I can keep up. And Hackett, he more than keeps up, man. I wish Genesis would have allowed Steve Hackett more and more and more stuff. And sadly, he would quit Genesis after Wind and Wuthering in 1977. And I don't think the band was ever the same again without Steve Hackett on guitar. And of course, if you ever listen to Steve Hackett's solo albums, they are all incredible. I mean, Steve Hackett is genius. And I don't know if he ever really made a huge effort to come back to Genesis. You know, everyone always talks like, oh, Peter, he's going to come back to the fold. But they never talk about Steve Hackett coming back. And to me, that's just as important. I would love to see Genesis in 2023, even if Phil, you know, he's gone, he can't play because all his diseases. But I'd love to see, like, you know, this new Genesis in 2023 with Gabriel, Hackett, Banks, and Rutherford. Ah, Sharky has an idea with a breakthrough here. I don't think Phil would like that, but, you know, I really think the Phil Collins years hurt this band's, you know, they had a strong foundation in the 1970s with Peter Gabriel. And, you know, the fluffy, poppy genesis of Abacab going forward. I mean, Abacrap. Just shark sandwich, man. Gets a 2-word review. I mean, there's some moments on it, you know, here and there, but they just become a dance pop band. I mean, there's some good songs here and there. They're still jamming live, playing incredible stuff with Daryl Sturmer and Chester Thompson, but something's missing, man, without Steve Hackett. And, of course, without Peter Gabriel. But I would love to see this band reunite Gabriel, Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford, and Hackett. 4 incredible musicians. Do an album in 2023 or 2024 and bring back Genesis. I mean, it's never going to sound this great again like 1971 with Nursery Crime. Or, you know, or Foxtrot, or Selling England by the Pound, or, you know, The Lamb Lies Down, or A Trick of the Tail, or Wind and Wuthering. But, man, I would still love to see them try to do something weird with Peter Gabriel in the modern era, in the days of today. I don't think they're too old, man. I'd love to see it. I mean, it's too old for Phil. I mean, he's not looking good, man. Whatever that disease is that Phil has, it ain't good. At 1-800-449-8255, the Clark, the Shark Show, and I'll pray for Phil Collins, man. You know, I don't always like him as a human being or as a musician. But he's still, I don't know, man. He's a great guy, Phil. I love the Phil in the 70s. That's the Phil I'll always remember. And even the Phil on stage with Bill Bruford, 1976 with the Trick of the Tail tour. That's the Phil I like. ABBA crap and, all that, I don't know, man. I kind of like Phil with Duke. That's like the last hurrah. That's like the last moments where, I really like Phil. But I understand, man. You're making a lot of money on tour. And bands sell out because they see huge riches and fortunes and gigantic money, gigantic tours, where the musician is going to be worth $60 million or $200 million, and you can't go back in time to where you were so great with Nursery Crime or Selling England by the Pound back in the day with the giant hogweed and the musical box and Seven Stones and Harold the Barrel and the Fountain of Salmacis. Man, what an amazing album. And what an amazing year, 1971. And Genesis, Nursery Crime, with a girl just hitting human heads out on the field. She's playing croquet or golf or cricket with human skulls. And there's this other girl in the background like a referee. But this girl's just so evil. She almost reminds me of that girl on Fallen Angel by Uriah Heep. This is her when she was young in 1971. And then on Uriah Heep, she's an older girl, an older lass, slaying a boar's head in a nest. She's killing a wildebeest, but here, in the early days, she's just hitting a human head on the ground for the Queen. 1-800-449-8255, the Clark the Shark Show. And you just got the only review you're ever going to need of Genesis. Nursery Crime, 1971. And this girl, this lass, playing croquet with human heads. I love this album cover. It's incredible. It's in the top 10 all-time album covers. Genesis Nursery Crime, 1971. Man, what an album cover. Oh, but what amazing songs come under the cover when you pull out the vinyl or the CD and you play this incredible, incredible album. I love this album. I mean, Phil, he's not quite there on drums yet on this album, but he sounds really interesting. And Mike Rutherford locks onto the weird little drum beats and patterns that Phil Collins is doing. And then Hackett just applies this angry layer of guitar, snarling over it. And of course, Tony Banks, as usual, brilliant genius, making just his keyboard noise all over this amazing, incredible album. One of my favorite progressive rock albums. I don't consider this prog rock. This is great music by Genesis at the Clark the Shark Show. 1-800-449-8255, and you just heard the word, the testimony from Clark the Shark. And I'm out. Peace.